Hello and welcome to today's nonprofit podcast. Our topic is crowdfunding, legal issues for nonprofits. My name is Jason Q. I'm an attorney with the Nonprofit and Small Business Legal Assistance Programs at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. Our mission is to provide pro bono legal services to small businesses and nonprofit organizations in Washington, D.C. I'm joined today by my colleague, Christine Kulimani, who is another attorney with our office, and we're going to wade into the murky waters of crowdfunding platforms and some of the legal issues that using these platforms can present for nonprofits. I read that a World Bank report predicting that crowdfunding will become a $90 to $96 billion industry by 2025, and a significant amount of that money will be going to nonprofit causes. So we're definitely not going to cover every corner of this topic, but just given how much energy and enthusiasm there is in this space, we wanted to get folks thinking about some of the legal ramifications that are involved. So Christine, just to start off, what's like a main takeaway that nonprofits who are just starting to or that are beginning to think about using crowdfunding platforms, what's a takeaway for them?
I think that the biggest takeaway should be that while crowdfunding is very appealing, it's super attractive, before you start a crowdfunding campaign, to really make sure that you go through and plan it well. Mm-hmm. And understand the legal ramifications, and also just understand the platform and the agreement that you're getting into. Great.
And I think we'll dig down and we'll cover maybe some more specific legal topics, as we chat. But just to set the stage, why don't we step back and go, what is crowdfunding? So what are like maybe some definitions or examples that we can guide people through?
Yeah, so crowdfunding, different people have different definitions, and I think in this context we want to look mostly at the type of crowdfunding that nonprofits enter into. Mm-hmm. And so this is really, raising funds, usually in small amounts, from a large group of people. Typically it's done through the internet, through mm-hmm. these different platforms. Some of them are mm-hmm. tailored towards specific nonprofits, and some of them are just general, and nonprofits choose to use the platforms. Mm-hmm. And individuals and organizations can both use crowdfunding, slightly differently. And nonprofits, it seems, tend to use crowdfunding to get donations.
Right.
Whether it's for a specific purpose or just general operational support, a big campaign, let's get everybody to donate in this 1 month, these 2 months.
Right. And so, nonprofits have been fundraising online for a long time now. You think about the Donate Now button on a nonprofit's webpage. That's nothing new, but I think I totally agree with you that the difference when we're talking about crowdfunding is that they seem to really be leveraging the internet and social media to reach a much broader group of people, a much broader base of potential donors, and that's going to expose your nonprofit and get you donors maybe at a scale and kind of at a diversity that didn't exist before. So that's going to be really interesting for folks, and that can carry certain legal ramifications.
Definitely, by reaching more people, and we don't know how they find them. People may share them on social media. Mm-hmm. They may be browsing the homepage on one of these crowdfunding sites. Mm-hmm. Organizations may get a large base of donors somewhere unanticipated. Yeah. And I think you alluded to one of the big legal implications of that is having to register for a charitable solicitation license in those jurisdictions.
Yeah, because and we'll talk about charitable solicitation, and we get there because space doesn't matter as much. I can go on to Kickstarter and just Google an issue that I'm interested in, like mental health, and it's just going to spit out all of these organizations mm-hmm. and all of these campaigns, and it's not going to care what state I live in, or it's going to be a much broader search. And so it's not like me walking around town and seeing fundraisers on street corners or something. That's way more localized. These crowdfunding platforms are going to be a much broader universe of potential nonprofits that I interact with.
Definitely, and it's even unique from going to a nonprofit's website and donating through there, which is also through the internet. Mm-hmm. Because generally, when you would do that, it's because you're familiar with the nonprofit or you're interested in it. You may have some tie. Right. Crowdfunding really takes those ties away.
Right. Okay, so we've teased this one quite a bit. Let's talk about charitable solicitation. We talk to nonprofits all the time about charitable solicitation. We think it's probably an area where folks have less awareness than they should. So just to set the stage, over 40 states require nonprofits to register with the state before they can solicit funds or fundraise in that state. So it's a state-by-state regulation. Before the internet, that was pretty easy to understand. If you're going door to door in a state, or if you have professional fundraisers, fundraising on street corners in your state, or if you're sending a physical mail campaign to a state, that's pretty clearly fundraising in a state. But I think the internet has really made that super complicated.
Yeah, it definitely has. And the way that you reach out to and maybe solicit or maybe don't, it's a little bit of a gray area with crowdfunding is if you create a platform and you don't share it and people find it and you get a substantial base, in a certain jurisdiction and they're donating, or if you get miscellaneous donations from spread out, what triggers needing to register and what's that threshold? And I think, due to time and costs, sometimes nonprofits may err on the side of not wanting to have to register to save time and to save money.
Yep. It costs money to register in every state. So.
But that's risky.
Right. To not register.
Yes.
Definitely. And so, a concrete example from the internet, if we go back to those Donate Now buttons, if you have one of those buttons on your website and you're getting donors from, let's say I'm a DC nonprofit, most of my donations come from DC residents because that's how they find my nonprofit. They're interested in my DC nonprofit. But every once in a while, I'll get a donation from North Carolina. I get a donation from someone in Michigan. I get a couple from California. What do I do? Do I have to register in those states? And that's been a big question. It's still not completely resolved, even though we've had the internet for a long time. And there's been a lot of time to develop case law or guidance on this issue. There's still not a lot of concrete guidance about what nonprofits should do. So we do have something called the Charleston Principles. These are principles that state attorneys came up with kind of many moons ago, it feels like now, closer to the beginning of the internet than where we are now. But what the principles say is they try to kind of untangle this issue, and they say that if your nonprofit, through its online fundraising campaigns, are specifically targeting people, actively targeting people in a certain jurisdiction, or if you receive contributions from a state on a repeating and ongoing basis or on a substantial basis through your website, then you have to register in that state. You also have to register in that state if you get donor information kind of passively through your Donate Now button or something, and then you actively use that information to re-solicit people in a state. That also causes you to have to register. So these are non-binding principles, right?
Yes.
But they do provide some structure for how people can think about it, and I think they're a good guideline.
Absolutely. And having some sort of guidance will help nonprofits who are in these murky waters. And as we said, you may want to err on the side of caution and protect yourself. But these Charleston principles, they're on that side. Right. And that's good to know. And to have some guidelines about, have we hit that trigger yet? Do we really think that we need to be registering? We got maybe 20 donations from California, and they seem to be coming in steadily. Right.
And the standard was repeated and ongoing. So maybe for you, maybe one donation every 3 years from Montana wouldn't reach that threshold. But yeah, you're right. If we're getting 20 donations every month from California.
But then if you reach back out to that person who made that one donation from Montana, then you would need to register in Montana.
Totally. So there are some bright lines, but there are also some gray areas. And I think definitely that repeated and ongoing standard is not something that we have a lot of guidance about how to actually define that. And it's going to vary state by state. So, if folks are having an issue with this question with respect to donations from a certain state, that could be an issue to talk to an attorney about. It's even murkier with crowdfunding now because these platforms now are aggregating donors from across the country, from a lot of states. But what I've noticed is that the nonprofit might not have the same information about a donor's geographic location as they would through maybe a Donate Now button that's mediated through, PayPal or some sort of other online fundraising portal.
Yeah, definitely. And that may be something that when nonprofits choose what crowdfunding platform they want to use or who to put, who to go through, they should understand what information is collected.
Right.
And what information that they're going to receive and have access to, just to make sure that they are doing their best and are in the closest compliance that they can be.
Right. Like let's go maybe some hypothetical. Well, not hypotheticals. These are real examples. But if you use Amazon Smile, for example, that's where you can list your nonprofit as a partner with Amazon Smile. People can sort of designate your nonprofit to receive a small percentage of all the money that they spent on Amazon. So that's like a really interesting kind of next generation crowdfunding platform in my mind. And how Amazon Smile really works, though, is that all of the money is collected by Amazon, and then Amazon distributes lump sums to the participating nonprofits according to what percentage of the users pick that nonprofit as, being their beneficiary. So all the nonprofits get is a lump sum of money on, some regular basis from the Amazon Foundation. They have no idea who the individual donors are who designated them as being the beneficiary. So that's a kind of a complicated little tweak on what we've been talking about. And I think it'd be really hard for nonprofits to get the information about what states donations are coming from and what states they therefore have to register in. So at least until now, it's up, our hands are up in the air, and we don't really know what to do about that situation.
Yeah, that's tough. And that may be something that develops over the next years as Amazon Smile and similar platforms become more popular and crowdfunding and, states or the federal government decide to step in and update requirements.
Yeah, definitely. And another example is Facebook is becoming a really big crowdfunding and charitable donation platform right now. And it's the same kind of thing. If you have Facebook allows you to set up a page for your nonprofit and then put a donate now button right on Facebook. So all of the transaction happens within Facebook. People don't leave Facebook. If you do that, Facebook will give you a report saying the first and last name of the donor and their email address, but they're not going to tell you their state of residence. So that's another example of one of these online platforms now not even giving nonprofits the information that they would traditionally use to decide whether and where they're going to register for charitable solicitation purposes. So really complicated.
It is.
But if you're using a platform that does tell you the state that every donor lives in, that's going to give you more information and maybe trigger more registration requirements for you.
Yeah. I can think of, some, especially platforms that are built for nonprofits. So, for example, Razoo is the one I'm thinking of.
Okay.
They'll send you checks regularly with the donations, and in it it'll have the name, the mailing or billing address of the individual, maybe their email address.
Yeah.
And so that is the more traditional information, and I think that may definitely trigger registration.
Right. If you see that a lot of your donors are coming from Maryland, you're probably going to have to start to register in Maryland. But that's not, it's not a good or a bad thing, because traditionally we've wanted a lot of donor information. We want to have people's contact information. We want to reach back out to them. They've donated to us once. They care about our cause. The traditional fundraising model is to capture those people in our system and to try to get them to be engaged and repeat donors. So, crowdfunding doesn't mean that this sort of more casual, potentially more anonymous system is better. It's just a different system than what we've been working with traditionally. And if your nonprofit decides that it does want to re-engage donors and use that information, that's fine. You just have to be ready to register in the states where you're required to register. Yeah, okay. So what's another legal issue that people should think about when they're using crowdfunding platforms?
I think one of the other big legal issues that nonprofits need to think about when they decide to launch a crowdfunding campaign is whether or not they're advertising the funds in a way that they would be restricted.
Okay.
So, for example, is the headline, "Help us build our new building"?
Right.
At that point, the funds that were donated would be restricted funds, and they need to make sure that they're accounting properly.
Right.
And that those funds are only spent towards that building.
Right.
Unless they've received a release later.
Right, and not to commingle the money that you're getting from that campaign to pay the light bill at this other building or to use it for other purposes.
Exactly, and I think that, with crowdfunding, having flashy descriptions or headlines is a way to draw in donors, particularly donors that may not be part of your regular base.
Right.
But you do need to be aware and be accurate.
Right.
You can say, these are some examples of things that we want to do.
Right.
But these funds may also go for general operations, not just, program X, Y, and Z, or this, new building that we want.
Right. Right, right. I think a lot of nonprofits are going to be tempted to highlight a particularly compelling program and then have the funds locked in to supporting that program when really maybe where the financial need for your organization is, because a lot of people are in this situation is not actually in a program-related funding. They just need kind of general funding, and crowdfunding can be a really good source of that general funding.
Yeah, and so I think nonprofits should just be clear about that. Highlight examples of, some of the flashier work that you want to do, but be clear about what the funds are going to go towards. Are they general, unrestricted, or are they this one specific project?
Right, totally. Okay, we thought of a few more. Few more legal topics. One that I'm really interested in is acknowledging quid pro quo donations. So this is another kind of quirky area that people don't think about too much, but according to IRS rules, when donors receive something, a good or service of value, in exchange for their donation, we call that a quid pro quo transaction. And if the initial donation was over $75, nonprofits are required to provide a letter to the donor informing them of the value of the quid pro quo service or good that they received in return. So, for example, if we sell $100 gala tickets and the value of the dinner at the gala is worth $30, I have to tell all of my ticket buyers that they received the fair market value, by the way. They received a $30 dinner in return for their ticket. And then when those donors go to claim their ticket as a charitable contribution on their tax returns, they're supposed to subtract out the $30 from the $100 to arrive at the actual $70 value of the charitable component of their contribution. So that's sort of the regime. And just because you're doing online crowdfunding fundraising doesn't mean that you get out of that. So especially, and I think about something like Kickstarter, where something that's really important for that model is that people get little perks or incentives or products in return for certain levels of funding. If you're going beyond that $75 threshold and you're giving people items of value, T-shirts or tickets to events or some sort of book or product, you have to still be informing people of the value of those goods that they're getting in return.
So what if in return, say, we want to give maybe a keychain or a bumper sticker, something that would generally be, considered of insubstantial value? Yeah,
so there is an exception in this regime for something that they call items of token value, and there's a way to calculate the value of those items. So I think the best recommendation, it can get a little technical and a little tricky. I think the best approach is that if you're giving folks something in return for their donation, run this by an attorney or by someone who understands what the laws are in this area, and make sure that you're giving people the right information. Or if you really want it to be super safe, you could just tell people as a matter of practice, kind of across the board, what the value of the perks and the items that you're giving them are. Even if you're not legally required to in every case, that might be actually an easier way to go about it than to figure out which donors need to get a letter, which ones don't. Maybe some nonprofits will just find that kind of above across-the-board approach works better. We just tell everyone how much stuff is worth when we give them stuff.
That makes sense. And, talking about this substantiation of donations, that may be something that nonprofits want to look into when they're selecting a platform. Some platforms may handle the substantiation letters,
right,
and some may not.
Right.
And so it's very important for the nonprofit to know that going in, what's their responsibility.
Right, that's right.
And, it builds good relationships with the platform and also with the donors.
Right.
If they don't get that, that's problematic. Them having to reach out, they may not want to donate again.
Right. If it's a hassle for them to get that substantiation letter for their donation. Yep, absolutely. What's another issue that nonprofits should think about in this space? I think we have time for a couple more.
I think that nonprofits, especially on some of these crowdfunding campaigns that may be a little less traditional, and especially if they're not necessarily tied to the nonprofit mission, are whether or not they're going to have any tax implications. Okay. Is it going to be unrelated business income tax?
Got it. Spell that out for me. How would that work? What's an example?
So an example of this may be that a nonprofit wants to raise funds, say, for this new building. But the way that they're going to do it is having an ongoing campaign, maybe for a collaboration with, they have T-shirts they're going to sell, or these really nice tote bags.
Right.
And the 3 requirements for it to qualify for as taxable income is that it's from a trade or business.
Okay.
And that this trade or business is regularly carried on by the nonprofit.
Right.
And that it's not substantially related to the organization's exempt functions.
Right.
So T-shirts and tote bags,
Right.
They are not substantially related to the organization's performance of its exempt function of, tutoring children after school.
Totally.
And it's a trade or carry, if it's over a long period of time, it's regularly carried on by the nonprofit, or if it's, every year, we do a holiday-themed one and a summer-themed one, and it's regular. And selling these textiles, that's trade or business.
Okay,
that's something that
that's an
companies
example.
do.
Yeah. And where it gets so tricky is that a lot of these crowdfunding platforms can be used for for-profit ventures and nonprofit ventures at the same time. And they're really effective as for-profit venture platforms as well. So like Kickstarter, for example, now I think when I go on Kickstarter, it looks like most of the things on there are for-profit ventures, pledge $80 and help us get our company started. And then once we're off the ground and we're making widgets, we'll send you 3 widgets. And you're essentially just buying, you're pre-ordering widgets. And that's what's happening. So I think it'd be very easy for a nonprofit to slide into that kind of business where, we're just sort of essentially selling goods or services in return for donations and sort of making a profit, quote unquote, off of those transactions. And that's how we're funding our organization. Yeah.
And I think that nonprofits, before they launch a crowdfunding campaign, really should think about which approach they want to take.
Right.
Do they want to use it solely for donations, more in the traditional fundraising sense, or do they want to have some other tie-in that may trigger it being taxable income?
Right. And again, we should emphasize that it's not a problem if you're doing something that looks more like a social enterprise that has a kind of quasi-commercial component to it. It's not necessarily a problem if you're doing some activity that generates some taxable income, but it's just don't walk into this blindly.
Exactly.
Be ready to do it. Be ready if you're going to generate taxable income through a kind of business arm of your nonprofit. Be ready to pay the taxes on that and to have the accounting system in place. And just don't walk into it blindly. Really critically think about what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let me talk about one more thing that I think is so fascinating, and it's kind of what I'm calling the multiplier potential of some of these crowdfunding platforms. So not only do these platforms let you as the nonprofit set up a campaign or set up a page on Facebook and to directly collect donations through those pages, but some of the platforms, especially the ones geared towards nonprofits or Facebook, actually allow individuals who are not affiliated with your nonprofit, just private citizens, to set up their own micro fundraisers in support of your nonprofit. So I think you might have seen this on Facebook where someone, for their birthday is raising money in support of XYZ nonprofit. And so you have people sort of freelance fundraising on your behalf, which can really multiply your scope and your impact, which is really great. And I think this is another gray area where there are a lot of unanswered questions. But one that I have been thinking about is if some of these individuals on behalf of, as part of their fundraising campaign on behalf of your nonprofit, engage in activities which 501c3 nonprofits are prohibited from engaging in. So for example, 501c3 nonprofits cannot engage in lobbying, cannot engage in political intervention, for example. They can't support or oppose candidates for office. So if someone on their private Facebook fundraiser goes, please donate money to XYZ charity. Together, we're going to support civil liberties and we're going to impeach President Trump or something. That is the kind of messaging that a 501c3 that would give a 501c3 a lot of heartburn. and the query is what happens when it's happening on one of these affiliated campaigns that you never condoned, but that is in support of your nonprofit, that's using your nonprofit's name. The money is going directly to your nonprofit. What do you do? What are your responsibilities as a nonprofit when it comes to the messaging in those campaigns? And I think that's an open question.
Yeah. I mean, that's something new in the law, and again, or something that, the law hopefully can address soon, because it's so important for these nonprofits to have their 501c3 status.
Right.
For many of them, that's how they are able to exist, is by being tax exempt.
Right.
And also, having these third parties advertise these nonprofits or associate with them in a certain way may have a certain impact on the nonprofit's image that's beyond their control.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's this hard part about these unaffiliated campaigns, is the nonprofits aren't the ones in control of it.
Right, right. I think maybe the best advice that we give at this point, without further guidance, legal guidance really, is to not turn a blind eye to what's going on. And if you find out that someone is fundraising using your name, but that they're doing it in a way that's not consistent with your mission, or they're doing it in a way that's not consistent with how a 501c3 is supposed to operate, you might want to intervene and try to do your best using the platform or reaching out to the person to try to shut that down or to try to take control of that situation. Because you definitely don't want it spiraling out of control for legal reasons, but also for kind of reputational reasons, right? You want to make sure that all the fundraising that goes on in your name doesn't indirectly damage your reputation. Do you have any closing thoughts for folks, or any last little notes that we want to leave people with?
I just want to reiterate again that crowdfunding can be great, but it shouldn't be entered into lightly. Understand the platform, understand and have a plan for what the goals for the crowdfunding are. And if you need to, reach out to an attorney. Plan this. Make sure that it's above board to protect, both the donors and your reputation with them, and also to protect the organization and your 501c3 status.
Yeah, and read the fine print of your contracts.
Always read the fine print of contracts and have an attorney review it.
Yeah, totally. Okay, great. Well, hopefully we've, gotten people thinking about some of these issues. You should feel free to reach out to the DC Bar Pro Bono Center, especially for you DC nonprofits here. We have a bunch of services and resources that we can offer you. Today's podcast is part of a series organized by the DC Bar Pro Bono Center, focusing on practical challenges that nonprofits face on a regular basis. On our website, you can find other webinars, newsletters, legal alerts, archived podcasts, and other resources covering a wide range of nonprofit legal issues. That website is www.lawhelp.org/DC/CED. That's lawhelp, LAWHELP. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.